No, I think it's just the same as normal. Just do Last board, just. Come on, Jeff.
Come on, Jeff.
Come on. Do it.
Just be a man for one time ever. Come on.
Come on,
Do
Jeff.
it. Do it. Do it. Do it. We're going.
Courtney, look out.
Alright.
It's not gonna be. Actually, do you just want to toss it to me?
Yeah. This will go.
Oh, love it. Great. That was supposed to explode. Did I break the chair? It's just a small. Don't tell Mike. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Jeff, are you okay?
Don't tell Jay.
You broke some of her axe.
I didn't break.
Axe in her. Nice in her a picture.
Alright, now I gotta clean it up. Have you ever made a mistake before? I definitely never have, but I can imagine what it'd be like, and it sounds quite awful. No, I make mistakes all the time, some big, some small, and I can tell you with certainty that, like, wherever the line is of perfection, like a perfect person, I'm definitely far, far from it. And I know you're all shocked, like, oh, Jeff, no way, like, you're amazing, don't say that. But it's true, you guys, even tall people make mistakes. And now today we're wrapping up our Jesus Loves series by talking about how Jesus loves sinners. And the word sin, like, it has this sort of, I don't know, weight to it. And one mistake that I think is easy to make, and one that gets made often, is talking about sin and mistakes synonymously, like they're the same thing. But there's actually quite a big difference. Like a mistake, it's unintentional. Like I made a mistake and smashed my face into a glass door, and you know what, that happens. Like people don't always see good. But that's a lot different than, oh, I made a mistake and cheated on that test. Or I made a mistake and I lied to my parents. It was a mistake looking at that, or to do that, or to drink that, or hide that, or say that. I'm sorry, it was just a mistake. I mean, you understand, right? I said I was sorry. Like, can you see the difference there? Like, sin it's violating what God says to do, just putting a hand up to him and saying, like, you know what, Lord, I'm not really feeling that. I'm actually just going to do things my way, and it'll probably be better than your way. But mistakes, I mean, mistakes happen. But sin, it's always a mistake, but not all mistakes are sin. And what happens when we classify our sin as simply a mistake is it defers the responsibility away from ourselves. Like the choice that we made to act in opposition to God seems less serious if it was just a mistake, because I don't know, it wasn't really our fault, right? It was just a mistake. But I think we all know that that's not the case. Like, I want you to think about, like, the sin in your life versus some of the mistakes that you've made. And to be fair, there was probably a little bit of overlap there. But specifically, when it comes to sin, we can feel it, right? Like, it weighs heavy on us. It creates some guilt in us. And the scariest thing is that it separates us from God. And that is a big deal. Like, if it wasn't a big deal, I don't think God would have needed to leave his throne and walk this earth, one, so that we'd realize the severity of our sin and that it's something that we struggle with in all sorts of different forms, and two, to create this redemptive path for us to restore communion with God, whom we've distanced ourselves from because of our sin. But he did just that. Like, Jesus came because he loves us too much to let sin win. So he said, I'm making a new way, follow me. And there's this story in John that I think paints this picture perfectly in chapter 8, verses 2 through 11, where it says, at dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts, where all of the people gathered around him. And he sat down to teach them. And the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, they brought in a woman caught in adultery. And they made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus, he bent down and he started to write on the ground with his finger. And when they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with this woman still standing there. Jesus, he straightened up and he asked her, "Where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Like Jesus, he made it clear that there is no one but him without sin and worthy to condemn anyone else for their sin. He said, "Okay, Mr. Holy Guys, like which one of you is living a perfect life? Sure, go ahead and condemn her." But they couldn't, because we live in a fallen world. Romans 3:23, it says we all have sinned and we all fall short of the glory of God. Like Jesus, he's calling them out like he did in Matthew 7:3 when he says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" You see, we all have enough weight on our own to deal with and to just be worrying about and condemning the sin of others. That's not our place. Like no one is without sin. But then we're left in like at the story at this place where the woman who has just been humiliated and shamed and objectified is left with Jesus. And what does he do? Like, does he say like, "Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir." "Well, then I better. Like someone has to." Like, no, he doesn't say that. He doesn't condemn her either. He says, "I'm not going to define you by your sin because I see you for who you are and the potential that I created in you." And then what does he do? He waves goodbye and says, "Good luck with life." And no, he invites her into a new life. He extends grace and forgiveness and love and says, "I don't condemn you. Leave your sin behind, follow me, and let's walk into this new life together." Like it's personal, it's love. Jesus, he loves the sinner. He loved the woman whose sin was made public, and he loved the crowd of people whose sin was still private. And Jesus, he loves you. Like he sees your heart, he sees what you've done, he sees your sin, and he says, I don't condemn you. Now let's leave your sin behind and walk with me. And I'll tell you what, that just blows me away. Like that the God of the universe never gives up on us, even when we continue to give up on him. And not only that, but he provides a path for us that leads back to peace and security and value. It's incredible. And now I just want to finish up this series by telling you a story. When I was in college, I went through this really bad breakup. Like I dated this girl for a while, but the problem was I didn't really know how to date well. Like I had only seen the movies, and even though I knew that they were like super romanticized, that's still all I had to go on for how to date. And so I romanced this girl. She became my whole world. I focused all of my time and energy into this person because she was #mine, and we had to be #couple goals. And if you would have paid any attention to the relationship series from February or from years past, you might see where there's a ton of problems going on right there, right? Like, we did nothing that I've now learned and taught. We didn't date in public. We didn't set clear boundaries emotionally, physically, or spiritually. We didn't seek counsel or advice from our friends or mentors in our lives. We didn't have a source of life in order to be a source of life to each other. It wasn't healthy. And it got to this point where I was pushing away my friends in the process. Like the people that were closest to me and were saying like, maybe this isn't a great idea. I said that they just didn't know what they were talking about, and I just blew them off. And I remember a couple of years into this relationship, driving down to where she was living and then getting dumped right there on the spot. And I was shattered. I just wasn't sad. Like I was hurt. I felt ashamed. I felt like a failure. I was worried about what other people would think, and I just felt alone. I remember driving home and not knowing what I was going to do next, but I called my friend David and asked if I could come over. And we had thankfully remained friends over this time, but there were so many times where I just blew him off and was such a jerk to him, but I had nowhere else to go. And so I called him and he said, "Come right over." He canceled all of the plans that he had for that night just to be present with me. And the same guy who first invited me to church sat with me in one of the most difficult times of my life, and he extended grace. For all the times that I was a jerk to him, he said, "Forget it. Let's move forward." And since then, I've had to do a lot of apologizing, but I am just blown away by the amount of grace that I've received, even when I feel like I certainly didn't deserve it. Rather than pushing me away, my friends, they surrounded me, they encouraged me, they spoke life into me, and they pointed me back to the source of life. They pointed me back to Jesus. And that sparked a completely new season and understanding of what my walk with Christ is. Like, I felt the weight of sin a lot in my life, but I've also experienced the freedom of grace and forgiveness in my life, and there is nothing else like it, you guys. Like we've all been standing in front of a crowd with our sin exposed like the woman in this story. I think it's pretty easy to be able to relate to what that must have been like. But the good news is that even though we felt that weight of sin before, we can experience the complete freedom from that sin because of what Jesus did for us, what he did for you. And there's only one explanation as to why God would do something so crazy and ridiculous for us. Because he loves you. Like more than you could ever think or imagine, the God of the universe who knit you together loves you so much. So much that he wants to spend eternity with you. So he offered you salvation. And if you've never accepted that grace and forgiveness, let's talk more. Like grab me, grab one of our leaders, and let's have a conversation, because there is nothing more that I want in this world than for you to experience the freedom, grace, and forgiveness that Christ created for you and offers to you. Like Jesus, he loves you.
So we're trying to tell you to poke a fork into the...
Yeah, just like you guys would. I'm gonna hit it here, and then I'm gonna special effect a pop and a spark.
You could probably stick it
can
all the
stick
way
that
out.
one
It's
into the-
plastic.
I want to.
But just do it.
No.
Start doing it.
Do it, Jeff.
Why? What exactly?
Do it.
What exactly?
Put
about-
it in there.
Just do
I don't
it.
even think you believe science.
Come on.
Yeah.
Genuinely am not sure that you know how this
You're a
works.
pansy. Come on, Jeff.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it. Do it. Do it.
I can't do it when I'm laughing. You guys aren't supposed to be funny. Okay.
Sorry, we can't help it. Do it.